What is stupidity? We often think of it as a personal failing, a lack of intelligence, a momentary lapse in judgment, or simply ignorance. But what if it is something much deeper, far more dangerous? What if stupidity is not an individual flaw, but a collective illness, a silent infection that spreads between minds like an unseen virus? Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a theologian and dissident during one of history's darkest eras, said something profoundly unsettling. Stupidity is not a personal flaw, but a group phenomenon. It is the condition where people stop thinking independently and instead surrender their minds to the collective, losing the ability to discern truth from falsehood. This surrender happens quietly, almost invisibly. It seeps into conversations, communities, and entire nations until independent thought is smothered beneath the weight of consensus. It is not loud or violent at first. It disguises itself as loyalty, as duty, as belonging, things we crave deeply as humans. Have you ever found yourself swept up by a wave of outrage, repeating phrases or beliefs you never fully examined? That is the silent infection at work. But why does this happen? Why does the mind, a vast and powerful landscape, so easily fall victim to a viral infection of thoughtlessness? How can something as vast as a society be poisoned by stupidity? And how can you protect yourself? The journey ahead will unravel this mystery, revealing not only the mechanics of collective stupidity, but also the spiritual courage required to resist it. If stupidity is a social virus, what are its pathways? And what keeps us from seeing when we are infected? Bonhoeffer's warning: stupidity as a group phenomenon. Dietrich Bonhoeffer lived through a time when entire societies were engulfed by blind obedience and thoughtless conformity. He observed how people, even intelligent and moral individuals, fell victim to what he called stupidity, not in the sense of ignorance, but as a collective surrender of reason. He wrote, "Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. Malice has a face, it acts with intent, but stupidity is faceless. It spreads in the absence of conscious choice, as people unconsciously give up their critical thinking to the group. This collective stupidity is sustained by social pressures, the need to belong, to avoid conflict, to align with authority or popular opinion. It's a kind of social hypnosis where individuals borrow thoughts and emotions from the group until their own minds fall silent. But why does this happen? Because thinking independently is hard, lonely, and sometimes dangerous. The mind resists solitude. It prefers the comfort of shared narratives, even if they are false. Bonhoeffer's insight was a call to awaken. The real danger is not just evil, but the mass abandonment of reason that allows evil to flourish. Stupidity, disguised as conformity and loyalty, opens the door for injustice and suffering on a massive scale. Yet this warning is not a judgment. It is a compassionate invitation to understand ourselves more deeply, to see how easily the mind can be hijacked by the collective. If you're ready to reclaim your power of thought, keep watching. This is not just theory, it's a life-saving truth for our times. How does this group stupidity take root? What psychological mechanisms make it so contagious? The Milgram experiment: obedience as a pathway to infection. In the 1960s, Stanley Milgram conducted a chilling experiment that peeled back the layers of human obedience and showed us the mechanics of the silent infection. Volunteers were instructed to administer increasingly severe electric shocks to a stranger whenever they answered questions incorrectly. The stranger was an actor, but the volunteers didn't know this. Most continued delivering shocks even when the actor screamed in pain, simply because an authority figure told them to keep going. Milgram's findings revealed a terrifying truth. Ordinary people are willing to obey authority, even against their own ethical beliefs, when pressured by a perceived legitimate figure. This obedience is a key pathway for stupidity to spread. It's not about cruelty, it's about surrender. The mind hands over responsibility to an external source, creating a mental vacuum where conscience is dulled. The silent infection masquerades as duty, loyalty, and discipline, values we hold dear, but underneath lies a dangerous abdication of independent judgment. Obedience becomes a virus, moving silently through social structures, enabling systemic harm without anyone feeling individually responsible. The volunteers weren't stupid, they were human, and this reveals how fragile our moral compass can be when faced with authority. Obedience is one form of infection, but what about the pressure to conform to peers, to surrender not to authority, but to the crowd? The Asch conformity experiment, the price of belonging. Solomon Asch's experiments revealed another vector for the silent infection: peer pressure and conformity. When placed in a group where everyone gave an obviously wrong answer to a simple line-matching task, most participants conformed at least once, even against their own perception. Why? Because humans are wired for belonging. The threat of social rejection triggers deep psychological pain, sometimes even more painful than physical pain. The fear of isolation pushes us to deny our own eyes, opinions, and logic just to fit in. This is the silent infection's sweetest trap. It offers connection in exchange for surrendering truth. The infected mind rewrites its own perceptions to match the group narrative. It's not mere ignorance. It is a profound internal shift where doubt is sacrificed to comfort. This social contagion warps reality itself. The mind becomes a mirror reflecting not the world, but the crowd's desires. The line between truth and falsehood blurs, replaced by group consensus. Asch's experiments show how fragile independent thought is, how much courage it takes to stand alone in a sea of agreement. Imagine this contagion magnified billions of times over in the digital age, where viral misinformation and outrage spread faster than ever before. The digital petri dish: how the internet accelerates infection. The internet is a vast, unseen petri dish where the silent infection thrives and mutates rapidly. Unlike physical crowds, digital crowds exist in millions of fragmented tribes connected by likes, shares, and retweets. Algorithms prioritize outrage, certainty, and emotion because they generate clicks and engagement. This creates echo chambers, isolated bubbles where misinformation circulates unchecked. Viral falsehoods become accepted truths simply because they are repeated by millions. In this new world, authority shifts from uniforms and titles to influencers, celebrities, and viral posts. Peer pressure is replaced by the invisible pressure of trending topics and online mobs. This viral culture amplifies the mechanisms Bonhoeffer warned about. The infection accelerates, moving silently from screen to mind, bypassing critical thought in favor of instant emotional reaction. We live in an age where misinformation is not an aberration, but the norm. The viral storm sweeps away nuance, replacing it with binary conflict and tribal outrage. But how do you recognize if you've been infected? What does it feel like when your mind is no longer your own? Signs of infection: when your mind is not yours. The silent infection rarely announces itself with obvious symptoms. Instead, it hides in certainty and moral righteousness, in anger and intolerance. If you find yourself repeating slogans without really questioning them, if you feel a surge of rage at anyone who challenges your beliefs, take notice. If nuance feels like betrayal and complexity feels like weakness, you may be infected. The infection shrinks your empathy to only those who think like you, erecting invisible walls around your heart. Your worldview becomes rigid, painted in stark black and white. Friend or enemy, right or wrong, without room for shades in between. Paradoxically, the infected mind believes itself to be awake and enlightened when it is sleepwalking in a borrowed reality. This is the trap. The silent infection convinces you that surrender is strength and conformity is courage. Recognition is the first step toward freedom. But what does it take to break free from the infection? The inner quarantine: creating space for your own mind. The antidote begins with retreat. You must create an inner quarantine, a safe space to disconnect from the noise of the crowd and begin thinking for yourself. Turn off the constant news barrage, step back from social media's emotional storms, and carve out silence in your day. Bonhoeffer's wisdom guides us here. Solitude is the soil where independent thought takes root. In the stillness of your own mind, without the pressure of the collective, you can hear the quiet voice of your own reason and intuition. This retreat is not isolation. It's a sacred act of reclaiming your mind's sovereignty. In this silence, doubt is no longer your enemy, but a doorway. Without this pause, the noise of the infection drowns out your inner compass. But solitude alone is not enough. The next step demands courage. The courage to stand alone. The courage to stand alone. Standing apart from the crowd is one of the loneliest acts of courage a human can perform. The need to belong is wired into our very biology, but courage is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to stand alone in truth despite fear. Asch's experiments showed that even one ally who resists conformity can break the spell. Your solitary resistance can ripple outward. This is the essence of awakening. To say, I do not know if you are right, but I must follow my own mind. Yet courage without wisdom risks arrogance. True courage is rooted in humility and discernment. How do we cultivate the wisdom to stand alone without losing connection or becoming rigid? The discipline of discernment. Discernment is mental hygiene, the disciplined practice of questioning everything you hear and think. Ask, who benefits if I believe this? What evidence supports this claim? Am I missing a perspective? Discernment is not cynicism. It is an openness to complexity and uncertainty. It is a cleansing practice that washes away the debris of misinformation and groupthink. Without discernment, you simply replace one infection with another. If you feel ready to reclaim your mind, share this message. Your voice may be the light piercing the fog in someone else's life, but discernment is fragile if the ego remains hungry. How do we face the ego's role in the infection? The ego's hunger for infection. The ego is often misunderstood as simply the source of pride or selfishness. But more deeply, it is a survival mechanism designed to protect the fragile self from uncertainty and vulnerability. It seeks control in a chaotic world by clinging to certainty, especially the certainty offered by collective thought. This hunger for infection reveals itself in the mind's craving for validation, applause, and the soothing comfort of rightness. The ego fears doubt because doubt undermines its sense of security and exposes the self to the terrifying unknown. When you observe yourself caught in heated arguments, refusing to reconsider your stance, or feeling threatened by opposing viewpoints, you are witnessing the ego's hunger. It is not a demon to be fought, but a part of your psyche to be understood with compassion. The ego borrows strength from the crowd, feeding on collective certainty, and becomes a carrier of the silent infection. It shouts the loudest in the mob, drowning out the voice of quiet reason. Yet recognizing this hunger allows you to create distance. Instead of merging with the ego's demands, you can watch it with compassion. This gentle witnessing is the beginning of freedom, where you see your mind infected, but you are not your infection. This compassionate detachment doesn't mean apathy. It means an inner clarity that allows you to respond with wisdom rather than react with ego-driven defense. Compassion for yourself opens the doorway to compassion for others, even those still trapped in the infection's grip. Seeing the infection in others without judgment. It is easy to look at others and label them stupid or blind, especially when we see them swept up in viral outrage or misinformation. But judgment only deepens the divide and fortifies the infection's hold. When you witness someone infected by collective stupidity, remember your own vulnerability. Every mind is fragile and subject to the same pressures of conformity, fear, and desire for belonging. Judgment creates separation. Compassion bridges it. Compassion is not condoning harmful beliefs or actions. It is recognizing the pain and fear underneath the mask of certainty. It is saying, I see your suffering, and I will not turn away. This compassionate stance opens space for dialogue and healing. The rare conversations where real listening happens. It is in these moments that the infection can begin to loosen its grip. Seeing others without judgment requires patience and humility, qualities that dissolve the ego's need to be right. This is a spiritual practice, an inner act of courage, where you resist the pull of the herd not only for yourself, but also for the collective healing of humanity. Dialogue is the antidote, but only if rooted in deep, patient listening. The power of deep listening is rare, almost revolutionary in today's noisy world. Most listening is a performance, waiting for your turn to speak or formulating a rebuttal. Deep listening means holding space without interruption or judgment. It is an act of presence, an invitation for the other person to reveal their true self beneath the mask of certainty. This kind of listening disarms the silent infection. It cuts through the layers of defensiveness, revealing the shared humanity beneath division. When you listen deeply, you create a safe harbor where transformation can begin, where rigid beliefs soften and curiosity blooms. Deep listening requires patience and surrender. It is not about fixing others or winning arguments. It is about witnessing the sacred struggle of another soul trapped in the viral haze. It is in this space that awareness spreads like light, illuminating the shadow of stupidity with understanding and empathy. This openness invites transformation, but only if you resist the urge to immediately correct or argue. The role of silence in healing. In the modern world, silence is often feared as emptiness or loneliness, but silence is the soil where healing grows. The silent infection thrives on noise, the endless chatter of outrage, distraction, and reaction. Silence interrupts this cycle, slowing the viral spread by giving the mind space to rest and reflect. When you create silence around the infection, whether in your mind or community, you allow questions to arise where before there was only certainty. In silence, the infected mind can recognize its own condition and begin to reclaim itself. But silence requires patience, a quality increasingly rare in a culture addicted to speed and stimulation. Learning to sit with silence, with discomfort and doubt, is a radical act of resistance against the infection. It is a spiritual practice that fosters clarity and peace, like the calm sky beyond the storm of the mind. But silence is only the beginning. It must be paired with patience to heal truly. Patience as a revolutionary act. Patience is often mistaken for passivity or weakness, but in the face of a viral infection of stupidity, patience is a powerful, revolutionary force. It says, I will not rush to judgment or action. I will hold space for truth to emerge. Patience fractures the infection's momentum. It resists the urge to escalate outrage and instead allows time for understanding. In an age of instant gratification, patience is a radical refusal to be swept away by the crowd. It is the steady hand that guides the mind back to itself, enabling the courage to be vulnerable, to admit uncertainty and seek deeper truths. This patience is not easy. It is a spiritual discipline requiring trust in the slow unfolding of awareness. And it prepares the way for the most difficult step, vulnerability. Vulnerability, the doorway to truth. Vulnerability is terrifying because it means opening yourself to doubt, to the possibility of being wrong, to rejection. Yet vulnerability is the doorway through which truth enters. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, the ego's fortress cracks open, and the rigid certainty feeding the infection begins to dissolve. This is not weakness. It is courage in its purest form. Vulnerability demands trust. Trust in yourself to withstand uncertainty, and trust in others to respond with empathy. It is in vulnerability that transformation truly begins, where the infection's grip loosens and your mind becomes a field of possibility rather than prison walls. This spiritual courage is the heartbeat of awakening, an inner act of rebellion against the herd. Hook. But vulnerability requires the foundation of trust, trust that is not certainty. Trusting yourself amid uncertainty. True trust is not knowing all the answers. It is having the courage to live in uncertainty and still act with integrity. This trust breaks the infection's hold by refusing to cling to rigid beliefs or borrowed opinions. Trust opens your heart to complexity and paradox. It is the willingness to say, I do not have all the answers, but I will keep seeking. When you trust yourself, you reclaim your mind from the viral contagion of certainty. This trust also opens the door to genuine connection with others, beyond agreement or ideology. It creates a sacred space where differences are respected and shared humanity is honored. Connection beyond agreement is the key to dissolving the silent infection's power. Connection beyond agreement. Connection does not require agreement. It requires respect, empathy, and the recognition of shared vulnerability. When we connect beyond ideology, the infection's power diminishes. The viral spread of collective stupidity loses its emotional fuel. Connection becomes the seed from which healing grows, a network of awakened minds supporting one another's freedom. This connection is not superficial politeness, but deep acknowledgement of each person's inner journey and struggle. It demands humility, the willingness to say, I may be wrong, and I want to understand. In this shared space, the infection loses its hold, and illumination begins to spread like light breaking through darkness. But connection is only the beginning. Transformation is the harvest. Transformation, from infection to illumination. Transformation begins with awareness, seeing the infection clearly, naming it, and refusing its sway. It unfolds through daily choices: to think critically, listen deeply, stand alone courageously, practice patience, and embrace vulnerability. This is the slow alchemy turning chaos into clarity, confusion into wisdom. Transformation is not a destination, but a continuous process, a spiritual journey toward inner peace and freedom. It is an act of rebellion against the herd, a claim to your mind's sovereignty. By choosing transformation, you become part of the cure, a light that weakens the infection's grip on the collective consciousness. If you want to live free from the silent infection, begin now. Share this message. Speak your truth gently. Stand your ground bravely. Remember, the battle is not against others, but within yourself. The battle within. Your mind as the battlefield. Every thought, impulse, and emotion is a battleground where the silent infection wages war for your allegiance. It whispers borrowed beliefs in your ear, fans the flames of fear, and shouts down the quiet voice of doubt. The viral contagion of collective stupidity depends entirely on this battlefield, the terrain of your mind, where it plants seeds of certainty and obedience, but within you lies a spark, fragile yet indomitable, a spark of freedom, clarity, and self-awareness. This spark is the power to choose moment by moment, awareness over infection, presence over reaction, courage over comfort. This inner battle is the most profound you will ever face. It is a war without guns or armies, but with thoughts, beliefs, and values. It is the fight to reclaim your mind, your soul, and your humanity. Victory in this battle means becoming sovereign over your thoughts, unshackled from the viral herd mentality. It means embracing uncertainty as fertile ground for wisdom rather than fearing it as chaos. It means choosing connection over division, patience over rage, and love over contempt. Defeat means surrendering to a borrowed reality, one shaped by viral misinformation, mob outrage, and the viral stupidity Bonhoeffer warned us about. It means your mind becomes a passive conduit for groupthink and collective blindness. Yet the choice is yours, and yours alone. The silent infection cannot enter your mind without your tacit consent. You are either a carrier, spreading the contagion unwittingly, or a healer, a beacon of illumination in the encroaching darkness. Where will you stand? Will you fight for your mind's freedom, or will you let the virus consume you? The battle within is fierce, but the prize is your true self, waiting patiently beneath the viral noise. Awakening, becoming the cure. To awaken is to rise from the viral stupor and reclaim your mind as sacred ground. It is to become the cure in a world drowning in misinformation and collective madness. Awakening is not a sudden event, but a daily spiritual practice. It begins with small acts, pausing before reacting, questioning your certainty, seeking out silence, and embracing vulnerability. It grows as you cultivate patience, deep listening, and compassionate understanding for yourself and others. When you awaken, you realize that stupidity is not a personal flaw, but a group phenomenon, one that you can resist by consciously choosing awareness. You stop being a passive victim of the herd and start being an active participant in healing the collective consciousness. Awakening brings clarity. The stormy mind calms, the waves of emotions settle, and the vast clear sky of your true self emerges. It is here you find peace, not by escaping the world's chaos, but by meeting it with a steady, illuminated heart. This is the inner courage Bonhoeffer spoke of, the refusal to succumb to collective thoughtlessness, the quiet strength to stand alone in awareness. You become a lighthouse, shining through the fog of viral stupidity, guiding others toward their own awakening. The last choice. This is not a gentle invitation. It is a call to arms, not with weapons, but with awareness. To choose ignorance is to consent to the slow suffocation of your mind. To choose awakening is to reclaim your sovereignty and ignite a revolution of consciousness. The silent infection lurks in every corner, waiting for your surrender. Will you give in, join the herd, and lose yourself? Or will you resist, stand alone if you must, and become the light piercing through the darkness? The choice is yours, but beware. In a world overwhelmed by viral stupidity, silence and inaction are complicity. Wake up now. Question everything, even me. The virus spreads when we stop thinking. It dies when we start remembering who we truly are.